All right. Sounds good. Yeah. Oh, no. Yeah. Yeah. We've had just with the podcast and stuff, like things that we mess up. I had one where I just completely deleted the whole track. Yeah. Yeah, and it was hard because we just do very like it's not scripted, we're just having a conversation. So we were trying to go back in and remember what we said and then trying to like force a conversation to happen again was just it was not good. Yeah. All right, cool.
I think I did the same thing again. I think I had my mic off for 2 seconds. I thought it was going to automatically come back on when I switched over, but it's not. But never mind. So welcome back, everybody. I'm going to do the wave again. Welcome back to Mental Health Chat. This is, I believe, episode number 3 now. I'm Mental Health Matt, and you can all look forward to today's conversation because this is going to be, I think, a really valuable one for anybody who has been through similar experiences to myself in terms of struggling with the impact of food and diet and nutrition on mental health. Because today's guest is Jody Savage. She is a nutritionist. She's a mother. She's all kinds of other things as well. So I'll let her introduce herself in a little bit more detail. But welcome, Jody. Thanks for being on the show.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Like I mentioned, you're a nutritionist. You're a mother. You are a podcaster. Is there anything else I've forgotten off that list that you want to add?
Well, right now I'm everything. I'm a therapist, a house cleaner, just everything.
Sure. Yeah. I think we're all learning new skill sets and new roles in 2020, I suppose. So to start out with, let's talk a little bit about your role as a nutritionist and a health coach, and how you got started along that path and where the sort of motivation to get into that field came from for you.
So I guess initially when I was 16, I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism.
Okay.
And the doctors told me that I would, this would be a lifelong issue. It would never recover and I'd have to take medication for the rest of my life.
Okay.
And, being a 16-year-old, you don't want to take medication. I didn't want to remember to take, and it was there were specific rules. You have to take the same time every day and, all this stuff. So, but I always felt really terrible. I just always felt terrible. But the doctor always said, no, your labs look great. So that continued on until I was 22. And when I was 22, I just stopped taking the medication. I was so over it. And then they did my labs. They said, everything looks great. And I was like, well, I don't take my medicine anymore. So how's that possible? And they were just kind of like, well, I guess you're cured. I was like, okay, well, that's ridiculous. You don't just get cured. So that sort of interaction. And then I had other interactions with doctors just like that afterwards, where I went through this time after I had kids where I had the worst acne ever. It was just horrible. And the doctors always said, nothing is you have to put stuff all over your face. You have to take these medications. You have to do these things to make it go away. And that was not something that I wanted to entertain. And so just having a conversation with my chiropractor, he suggested I change my diet, and that changed everything for me.
Wow. Okay.
So these types of interactions that I've had with medical doctors, while they are valuable for certain things, there are other areas where they're just not kind of up to speed on what nutrition can do.
Sure.
So I've been studying it for years and years, just as a 16-year-old leading up to, being in a relationship with Trevor and being a mom, and eventually decided to go to school for that because I felt like that was more of a passion for me than, my bachelor is in IT. So I went to school for computers, and I just don't use that at all.
Right.
So I went back to school and did this 9-month-long program where I became a certified health coach, and that pushed me further into it. It was right up my alley with what they were talking about. And then took that a step further and went back to grad school, and I completed half of my master's in nutrition and integrative health.
Okay. Awesome.
So that's where I am today. And, we've used food in this house to treat all kinds of stuff.
Sure. Yeah. And to introduce your family, I suppose, to the viewers here, your husband, Trevor, is a poker player.
Yes.
You have how many kids? Was it 3?
3 kids.
3 kids. And what are their ages?
They are 12, 10, and 6.
Okay, so I not having kids myself, I'm not familiar with what the difficult ages are that people talk about. So how difficult? They're all difficult. Okay, yeah, I figured that might be the answer. I figured there might not be any real easy ages. Maybe the easy ages are when they're adults and they don't quite need as much parenting anymore. I don't know, but
probably yeah. I have a preteen girl, so that's tough. The 10-year-old is having 20 kids just by herself. And then our 6-year-old is a boy. He's just different. So we have 2 girls and a boy. He's just a little different. He's a little bit more easygoing. He still has his moments, but it seems like there's just something with every age that it doesn't really get any easier. Because then as you get older, you start to experience just bigger problems, more in-depth problems with friends and things like that. So
Yeah, I guess the problems don't go away; they just change, right?
yeah,
It's sort of the same
exactly.
with a lot of phases of life for anybody. I guess it's hard to experience a portion of life where you just have no problems, but the problems are different in nature. So thinking back to getting into the at the beginning of your role as a nutritionist, was it a more holistic approach that you wanted to take when it came to food as well as exercise and things like that, or is it mostly food you're working with specifically?
For me, like I'm most educated on the nutrition portion of
Okay.
it. I try to live as holistically as possible,
Right.
but definitely with the nutrition approach, that was all taught to me from a very holistic perspective, which is what I was seeking out. I was not interested in the registered dietitian aspect, and that is no disrespect to any RDs out there.
Sure.
It's just not, like the government standards here in the US are not, I'm not interested in that.
Sure. Okay. So what would be, for those who aren't familiar, what would be the distinction or the dividing line between what you're doing and a registered dietitian?
So, registered dietitians, they're taught basically from the government guidelines. So,
Right.
like, it used to be the food pyramid, now it's my
Mm-hmm.
plate, where they're always suggesting that you have dairy with your meals, and grains are something that has to be had to have a
Okay.
healthy diet, and things like that. And then they, there's a lot of stuff with like Weight Watchers is a good example
Okay.
where all you have to do is follow a point system. As long as everything you eat falls within this point system, you can eat anything you want. Um, and that's just, that's not a great approach to health. Maybe
Sure.
that's an approach to get people to lose weight, but it's not
Mm-hmm.
a sustainable thing. And it's also not going to bring you like great health.
Sure. Okay. So it's more in terms of it's not necessarily in terms of the end goal. It's more the difference in methodology. Is that fair to say?
Yeah,
Okay.
I would say, yeah. Like the a health coach and the route that I took is going to teach you how to change your lifestyle and to live
Mm-hmm.
a very healthy lifestyle, to eat the best foods that you can possibly eat. It's not about like consuming a certain set of calories or specific macros. It's more about eating like whole, unprocessed foods and learning how to prepare those in ways that are really good.
Sure. Okay. So from the sounds of it, it sounds like there's almost a cooking element to it as well, right? From what you
Yeah,
say
I
about
actually
preparation.
had to, yeah, in my master's degree, I had to go through cooking labs. You had to learn how to
Oh,
prepare.
interesting. Wow. Okay. So was that a little unfamiliar for you, or did you feel pretty comfortable with that?
Yeah, I was fine with that. When I was growing up, my mom was a single mom, and she always prepared dinner every single night
Mm-hmm.
because we didn't have that option to really go out and eat out at places. So she was always cooking meals. And then when I would visit with my dad on the weekends, I did a lot of the cooking because it was just my dad and my brother there, and they don't
Mm-hmm.
want to cook. So then I would take what I learned at my mom's house over to my dad's house and cook meals there. So.
Okay, makes sense. So in terms of, I'm curious actually, just having talked about the family environment already, how much does what you do professionally overlap with what you do in the family in terms of ensuring that your family is eating well and that their well being is looked after?
I am very, very, very strict about ingredients and what is allowed to be consumed and what is not allowed to be consumed. And I'm not shy about that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very open and vocal about that. So my kids know that if they see, like, for instance, Mr. Softy keeps riding by, they don't even bother asking because they know it's a
Okay.
no, not
Wow.
happening. Like,
Mm-hmm.
they're not eating artificial dyes, they're not eating artificial anything. And we are completely gluten free in this house because my daughter was found to have a severe intolerance that has caused tons of mental health issues.
Mm-hmm.
So we stay very strictly gluten free in this house. And that's another thing where we don't waver on that. When we go
Mm-hmm.
out, we seek out places that have something that's gluten free. And if they don't have it, then we don't go there.
Okay. Wow. And it sounds from the sound of it that approach has been successful for you so far.
Yeah, I mean, they're so used to it at this point. There's
Mm-hmm.
definitely times where, they go to a kid's birthday party and they're like, "Can I please just have it?" And I'm like, "No,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. We're not,
Uh-huh.
I will not introduce this into your growing body."
Mm-hmm.
So,
Makes sense.
They're
Yeah.
used to it. They'll probably rebel when they get older, but
They'll have a phase when they just completely disobey all your rules, and then they'll after 2 weeks they'll just feel like crap and go back to what you what you told them, right? I assume. Yeah, so there's a question in the chat there about the gluten-free approach. We'll come back to that a little bit later on. So if you guys have questions, you can either drop them in the chat now, and we'll just revisit them at the end, just in case you forget them or whatever. Otherwise, you can hold them off till then. Totally good for everyone in the chat. So I'm kind of curious, actually. You and I have talked a little bit in the past about gluten-free and grain-free diets and the benefits of those types of approaches. Before we'll answer the question that came in chat a little bit later on, but we've talked about grain-free. You mentioned gluten-free just there. Could you clarify the difference between those two for anybody who may be seeing grain-free foods popping up in supermarkets these days and not sure what the exact difference is between grain-free and gluten-free?
Sure. So anything that's grain-free is gluten-free. Gluten is the protein that is found in most commonly wheat, barley, and rye. They're like the three things that you're going to find most commonly. So basically, you're finding it in processed foods. There's very little options that you're going to find that are whole foods that are gluten containing. So one is farro. So if you see farro, it's a wheat thing, like wheat berry. So that contains gluten, but otherwise it's going to be in bread and baked goods and cakes and things like that. Anything that uses flour is going to have gluten in it. Whereas anything that's grain-free will not have any grain whatsoever. So it's not going to contain rice of any kind, because if it's gluten-free, then a common thing is to use rice flour. But it will not have rice. It will not have quinoa, any grain that's out there. No corn. Corn is actually a grain. People like to call it a vegetable. It's not. So anything that would be considered your typical grains, whole grains, like that are in breads and things like that, that is where it's grain-free. So a lot of the grain-free stuff is made with almonds and almond flour, coconut, things like that.
I see. So grain-free is really, it's sort of like one level above gluten-free in the sense of how far removed from the grain you actually are, I guess.
Yeah, you're just wiping all grains out altogether. Whereas gluten-free, you can have grains, but you're going to have gluten-free grains like oats and rice and quinoa and things like that. I think amaranth is also one. But anything like you would just wipe all that stuff out if you're going grain-free.
I see. And your household is gluten-free, but not necessarily grain-free. Is that what you mentioned?
Correct.
Okay. And I guess that probably gives you a few more options, I suppose, right? Because I would expect that eliminating all grain whatsoever probably cuts out a lot of the stuff that you might use as a way to avoid gluten, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it's very possible to do a gluten-free that's also grain-free. The only challenge to that is the kids. The kids is where the challenge comes in, especially when you have a picky eater. Then you sort of have to have the grains in there because otherwise they're not going to eat. But Trevor and I were grain-free, and he still mostly is grain-free for years and years and years. And I actually prefer that way of eating.
Okay, interesting. So with that said, I think that this is a good time to kind of broach the topic of where the interaction is between what you're doing and the mental health domain. Because I think these kinds of diets, for me personally, changing my diet over the years has been one of the biggest I think, boosts to my mental health at different times. There have been various different evolutions that I've gone through in terms of different sort of realizations that I've had about certain things that don't sit well with me diet-wise and things like that. But I think that what I'm really curious about is what your role as a nutritionist and what your training has taught you about the mental health domain as a whole, and how we might, as a society, I suppose, go about improving some of the struggles that people are having these days, mental health wise.
Yeah, so that's a big question.
It is. Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. There's various factors that go into this, but definitely in mental health, taking a step back to really look at what you're eating on a daily basis, because people don't realize what they're consuming. They have no idea. I tell people to look at the ingredient label, what is in it. People have absolutely no clue what they're actually consuming, which is completely normal. There's nothing wrong with that. But we've had so many mental health issues in this house between my daughter and Trevor, who
Mm-hmm.
is super open about his mental health struggles. And just watching the way that diet has changed that, because we don't necessarily learn about mental health so much
Mm-hmm.
in the school process, but just we've gone through it on our own. So going through it here in this house has been the most valuable lesson because we've seen it firsthand. So with gluten, there's a lot of people who struggle psychologically and don't even recognize that gluten is a problem. They have
Mm-hmm.
no idea, but it's super inflammatory. Whether you have issues with it or not, it's very inflammatory. But people are led to believe that gluten is fine as long as you're not celiac. But it's
Mm-hmm.
just not the case. And then grains, especially for people who have mental health issues, it can be the same thing. So removing those, it really brings down the inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
But really taking a step back, like I said, to look at your diet and try to evaluate where you're going with it or what your plan is, and especially if you're struggling with mental health. I think it's the number one thing that everybody needs to do, because these foods, like I said, can cause so much inflammation, and it can also block absorption of certain nutrients and minerals, and then that's going to like screw up your whole body as well. So
Mm-hmm.
all of these things really play a major factor in the way that your brain is functioning, which ultimately leads to how your mental health is doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that certainly in terms of the interactions between different experiences that we have mental health wise and different decisions that we make day to day, I think that one sort of interesting area that I think is only just kind of starting to be, maybe I wouldn't say only just starting to be explored necessarily, but it's an interesting area that I think there's still a lot of growth to be done in terms of how we talk about these things, is the area where there's an overlap between not so much, I guess it's not so much an overlap, but there's this division between things that we control about our mental health and things that we don't control, in the sense that we have mental health held up as an area where a lot of people go through things that are chemical reactions occurring in their body that are not within their control. But at the same time, we also have decisions that we can make and things that we can do that are within our control to improve the quality of life that we experience and to improve our mental experience of life, to improve our own mental health. And I think that the thing that I kind of notice, or I have noticed over the past few years, is that the dialogue around mental health seems to be divided between discussion of the areas that are maybe not necessarily within people's control. So discussion of the impact of diagnoses that people have maybe a genetic predilection towards, versus the other side of the coin, where you have a lot of literature around health and personal development, and this idea that we're all trying to be healthier and fitter and stronger and things like that, not necessarily from a wellness perspective, but because there's just this narrative that we all have to constantly try to be better, And right. I think that for me, the most interesting thing about the interaction between diet and mental health, or the interaction between what you're doing and mental health, is that it toes that line, in the sense that we're taking a compassionate, holistic perspective towards mental health and saying to people, we're not trying to pretend that everybody who experiences depression, it's your fault. We're not trying to say that, but we're also saying that you probably have more control or more ability to exert an influence over your day-to-day experience of life than you might expect. And a lot of that seems to me like it's because of people maybe just lacking educational information about some of these interactions between the emotional experiences that you have day to day and the things that you eat, for example. So I think that people who are doing what you're doing, people who are working in this kind of area to grow people's understanding of how these interactions occur, that seems to me to be a domain where, if we look 5 or 10 years into the future in terms of what our understanding will be, it feels like there's a lot more to be discovered there. Do you feel like that's fair to say?
Yeah, for sure. And just going back to what you were saying with the chemical imbalances and all that, there's people who don't even recognize, because we don't talk, nobody talks about it. So there's people that don't recognize that some, not all, but some of the chemical imbalances are due to diet and lifestyle choices. So, like for instance, I can use my daughter as a great example, where before she was gluten-free, she was incredibly violent and had a lot of mental health concerns. It was like she'd wake up in the morning and it would, is it time for bed was basically the question that we would ask all day long, because she was so tough to handle. And we had emotional breakdowns every single day with every member of our household. And it was like living in hell. There's no other way to describe it. And when she was finally diagnosed through a medical doctor, but he takes a holistic perspective, so he's an integrative physician, he diagnosed her with a gluten intolerance, and her behavior changed night and day. She's no longer violent. And no, she is not cured and she's not perfect, but she's not a violent child anymore. And she can exist and function on a more normal level. She's still super hyper, but she's not, like I said, she's not violent and aggressive every day, which was the struggle. So people don't even know that's a thing, because nobody talks about it. And the research is ongoing, but they are finding that some people are having a lot of psychiatric symptoms just from gluten. So something as simple as removing gluten from your diet can make a world of difference for people.
Yeah.
And it's also really important to know that you have to keep your vitamin levels in a certain area, and the food today just does not give that to us. It's processed, or they spray stuff all over it. So the nutrient values are going down in the food, and we're not getting all those super important nutrients that we have to have in our bodies. So, that's major. And something as simple as omega-3s, you're not getting that from, like, your body's not making that naturally. You have to supplement somehow, whether it's your diet or an actual supplement. But all these things play vital roles in the way that your brain functions.
Yeah. And I think that what's always, I suppose, surprising to me is that the science of how we approach diet and how we approach nutrition, that it seems like almost every 6 months to a year or so, there'll be something new that you read about a discovery of, something that we didn't know previously about what is considered to be the healthiest way to live, let's say. Maybe a year or two ago, I feel like everybody was doing the keto diet, and then now science comes out that says maybe it's the keto over the long term is less good for you and things like that. But I'm curious, as someone working in this field, how do you personally stay up to date with what the science is, or how do you have like a process for research almost to keep up to date with new discoveries?
It's so hard. So because there's so much conflicting information, right? So everything that's out there, somebody says keto is the best way to eat, and you have somebody on this side that says keto is the absolute worst thing you could do to your body.
Yeah.
So it's so conflicting. I try to keep up with what I can, just looking online at things that are valid and talking with people. But otherwise, it's all about trying things and finding what works for you. And that is definitely the approach of a health coach or more holistic side, where everything is very individual. So, I could say, hey, Matt, I think that you should go keto, and you could do keto for like a week and say, I feel like I'm dying. This is not it for me. And it's just not, it's not good for your body. So everybody has a different, there's no one way to eat that works perfectly for everybody.
Sure.
And the research is obviously going to be ongoing. This is what makes this field so frustrating, is because the research is constantly ongoing, and there is so much conflict in the way that people feel, right? So like you have the vegans fighting with the keto and carnivores that just go at each other's throats because, one side says no meat at all, the other side says do nothing but meat. And there's no middle ground there, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's for me, I'll never say vegan is bad, paleo is bad, uh, uh, keto is bad. It's going to be what works best for you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I try to like remove myself from all of that. You know, the general approach that I take to people is that something like a paleo diet is going to be really good. It's a therapeutic style diet. And it's also just what I've worked with for so long that it's what I'm used to, and the gluten free. So I can help somebody go gluten free or paleo or keto very easily. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not against anything else. It's just all about what works for the person.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that certainly that's something that it's very hard to. It's hard for anybody out there to disagree with that, right? It's hard for anybody out there to say everybody's the same. Everybody should just do this.
Right.
You know, it just seems ridiculous to say that.
Yeah.
I want to quickly acknowledge a couple people from chat. One person, someone called Ygal says Jody is my hero. Now I don't know if that is somebody that you know who's popping up in the chat, or somebody who.
I think it is.
Okay,
It's
well,
probably Scott. I think his name is. If that's who it is. I
okay,
can't
well,
see that. All I can see is Zoom, so I can't see the
yeah.
chat. But
Yeah. So you're a hero to somebody out there, which is great.
great.
And I also want to say thank you to Elite Boy RD that says, "Hi guys, love your message. Thanks for doing your thing." So thank you. I appreciate you being here. We have some questions coming in as well, so we'll get to those in a bit. A couple of questions on the gluten front. I think people are very interested in that kind of area. So we'll definitely circle back around to that. But I think that one thing that's kind of interesting there in the area of what people are educated around, what people's existing knowledge is in certain areas. I think that there are a lot of when I look back at my own dietary experiences, there are a lot of very elementary errors that I made quite earlier on in my adult life, just as a byproduct of maybe not being as well educated about these things. So what would you say are maybe the errors that you see the most frequently from people that you work with, or the sort of maybe not errors, but like, you know, the stuff where you're like, okay, just first of all, stop doing this, you know?
Well, I see stuff all the time.
Okay.
So, but you know, one of the biggest things that would be considered trendy right now, which really doesn't need to be trendy, but you know, for the longest time we were all told low fat is the way to go. You have to be low fat or you're going to have a heart attack and it's not going to be a good situation, right? So that's false. They've determined that's absolute nonsense. Sure, you're not supposed to be like pumping the worst fats down your throat. That's not what it's about. It's about eating the best fats possible. So that's definitely something I see where people are afraid of fat. Like, we shouldn't be afraid of fat. Just, you can be afraid of the really bad fats, but don't be afraid of the really healthy fats, which is going to be avocado and wild salmon and what else? Olive oil, olives, avocado oil. These are the best types. Any oils that you're getting from nuts, that's all going to be the greatest stuff. The US diet is inundated with these super inflammatory omega-6 fatty acids, which just comes from all the vegetable oils. So there's canola oil in pretty much everything you see. And if it's not canola, then it's cottonseed, or it is some other crappy oil like peanut, or what else? Soybean oil, things like that. So that's all really junky oils that are in everything that are super inflammatory. They're going to cause all kinds of problems for you, mentally and physically. So that would be one of the biggest things. And grass-fed butter is also, and ghee, they're all really great options for a super healthy fat. So I definitely see that.
Okay.
Now, there's a lot of conversation. I would say I've had plenty of conversations with really super smart people that I respect about artificial sugar. I am not for it. I've read plenty of research that says that there's all kinds of health issues that come from it. They're not even sure why, whether it's because there's weight gain attributed with consuming artificial sugars, which seems like it should be the opposite, but it's not. But they're not sure whether it's something that's chemically happening or if it's something where people just kind of let their guard down because they're eating, you know, oh, well, this soda doesn't have any sugar in it, so I can eat whatever. You know, they're not sure. But there is some things to be said for artificial sugars. So there's plenty of other options for something like that, that you don't need to consume an artificial sugar just to cut out your sugar intake, because sugar is the worst thing ever and people don't recognize that. So I would say that's another thing too, like, no, I don't really eat sugar. I don't like dessert. And it's like, okay, well, sugar is not just dessert. It also comes in the form of any grain that you consume is going to turn into sugar as soon as it hits your body. So that's another thing that people don't really recognize. They don't realize how many grains they're consuming. So the carb side, when you're constantly ingesting loads of carbs, all that is turning into sugar, which is then going to be stored as fat because it's got nowhere else to go. So I would say they're like some of the big ones that I see on a regular basis. And then with kids, with the artificial dyes and stuff, there's a lot of research that talks about red dye and how that is a big problem for kids and their behavior. And parents witness it, when they feed it to them, but they don't stop feeding it to them. And I get it. It's hard. I do understand that. I feel like I'm in a completely different place than most parents when it comes to eating. So I do understand that that's really hard, but that is something that I see on a daily basis where, kind of makes my head explode. But
Sure, yeah, I can imagine. Let's talk a little bit more about how sugar is the worst thing ever, because that I think is an interesting question, and it's something that sorry, I've just noticed in the chat. I think Trevor's here because there's an account called Raising the Nuts, which I assume is Trevor. He says Jody is also my hero, so that's very nice of him. That said, yeah, sugar is the worst thing ever. That's something I've pretty much discovered for myself in the past maybe year or two. But it strikes me that there's a particularly, for lack of a better way to say this, sugar is very ingrained in American food specifically, because having moved from Europe, the first thing that sort of struck me about the food here is not only that there's a lot less natural ingredients being used in the US, but that they just cram sugar into everything. It's like every food product that gets made, they just get it to the end of the assembly line and then they just inject a bunch of sugar into it. I don't know if that's literally what they do, but it was crazy to me to come here and then just like back then I was still eating bread and I don't anymore, but I would have a sandwich and I'd be like, wow, this tastes completely different to how bread tastes back in Europe, in any part of Europe. It's because I look at the ingredients and it's like there's all these sugars and things in it that I'm just not accustomed to seeing in bread products. So I'm curious how much. I don't know if you have any experience working with people from outside the U.S. or people who have lived outside the U.S., but is this something that you feel like is a particularly like a worse problem in the U.S. because of the way we manufacture food, perhaps?
So I don't really have any experience working with anybody outside of the US, but I do know that ingredient wise, the food in the US is considerably worse than outside of the US. Everything, the chemicals that are allowed in it, the sugar is higher, like everything is different. Even the chemical makeup of the gluten in the US is different than not in the US.
Wow. So even the stuff that hurts you everywhere hurts you more in the US.
Yes, basically. Yeah. Like I know of someone, a girl that I went to high school with, she can eat baked goods in France because she likes to visit France, cannot have them here.
Yeah. And that's funny that you mentioned France, actually, because I lived in France for a while, and of all the places where I've eaten baked goods, France is the best. They take bread really seriously in France. And I would assume that the reason why they can get away with that without a huge amount of problems on the level of the way public health is going in the US is because they take ingredients seriously and they use more natural ingredients. I mean, if the French ate as much bread as they do and they ate American bread all the time, it'd be a nightmare over there. So certainly I think that from my own experience of having lived in a few different places and then come to the US, like it's eye-opening the extent to which this country's approach to the manufacturing of food is definitely different. So That's hopefully that's an issue that somewhere down the line we'll make some progress in solving. But I suppose right now it's pretty unclear as to how such a systemic issue can be addressed. Really.
Yeah, I think the problem here in the US is that it's all about making money. They don't care about the quality.
Right.
So, the list of the different types of sugar that the US can put into products is like, this long. You can't even see what I'm doing. It's very, very long. And also with ingredient labels, they have to list the ingredients in order from most to least. So whatever you see first, that's what is the highest concentration of that is in the product. So when there was a big thing years back where they were saying, if the first 5 ingredients is sugar, you should not eat the product at all. That was like a big thing that was going around. So then they changed it because, they don't want sugar being seen as the first thing. So then they started using different forms of sugar in smaller amounts, but a bunch more, so they could put it lower in the ingredient labels and not show it towards the top.
Oh
So
man.
yeah, it's crazy. So there's ingredients that are technically sugar that people just don't even realize. They see a big thing with kid stuff is that it's naturally sweetened. So then the natural sweetener will be something like a fruit juice, but it's a fruit juice concentrate. So that's where they boil all the fruit out, they pull all the juice out, and then they use that as the sweetener. Well, there's no fiber left. So you're just ingesting a sugar bomb. So but they make it seem like, oh, well, we're just using fruit juice. What's the big deal? But no. So yeah, there's a lot of issues with sugar in this country, like the way that people eat, the way that we've been taught to eat. And my kids are no different. I'm in the same place. My kids want to eat French fries and chicken nuggets and mac and cheese and things like that. So we try to do the best that we can with that and find the best quality ingredients that we can do and make a lot of stuff from scratch. But we're not immune to that here either. So it drives me crazy. The sugar in the kids' food, especially, is something that irks me probably more than anything else, because then these kids, I look at the menu for my kids' school and what they're supposed to be eating as, what they call a healthy breakfast based on government guidelines. And they're basically eating a breakfast full of sugar. And I sat down and calculated it one day. And in a school day, if a child goes to school and eats breakfast and lunch and has like the typical snack, because I was in the school building as a room mom, I see what the kids are bringing. So I just calculated like a basic day, and it came out to like 45 teaspoons of sugar a day that a kid is ingesting just while they're sitting at school, not even, for the whole day. And a kid should take in like maybe 3-4 teaspoons a day.
Yeah. That is wild. Like I thought you were going to say 45 grams and I was going to be surprised. But 45 teaspoons has got to be who knows how many grams. That's insane.
Yeah,
Wow.
they feed them like graham crackers. And one of the things was Trix yogurt. I'm like, really? Can we get something better than Trix yogurt? Like, yogurt is just a joke anyway, because people are like, oh, it's yogurt, it's healthy. But if it's flavored, it's a sugar bomb. That's it.
Wow. Okay. That's good to know. So, with all that said, I'm actually going to start pivoting to the questions now because we're getting a bunch of them coming in, and I want to make sure we have time to get through all of them. So the first one earlier on was from Heiser Flipper, who says, "What do you think about gluten-free approach for people without any kind of allergy or intolerance?" Now we kind of covered this one, right? And that we like gluten-free approach. We're positive on that, but I'm curious, maybe if you could just talk a little bit about the way that the science of intolerances and allergies has perhaps evolved, in that now I think we're moving, it sounds like at least we're moving a little bit away from thinking about it in terms of people for whom gluten is fine and people for whom gluten is not fine. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. I think that there's still so much to be done in that field because people don't understand that you can very safely go on a gluten-free diet. And even if you feel like you have to have whole grains in your diet, gluten-free is very simple and still include plenty of healthy whole grains. So that's very easy. But there's definitely still a huge disconnect in that gluten-free arena for people who have intolerances. Like Cam's other doctors, they didn't want to even talk about gluten being a problem. Once they said that she was not celiac, then they were done with that conversation. There was nothing else to be said for that. So, there's definitely still a lot of research that needs to be done in that area. But yeah, I think that on a general level, I think that pretty much everybody should be gluten free. I don't think there's any benefit to eating gluten, especially because gluten is going to be found in all the junk foods. You're not like I said, unless you're eating farro, which who the hell is eating farro? Some people do, but like generally people are not going out and getting farro to eat. So you're just taking it in some kind of form of baked good or processed junk. So yeah, I think eliminating it is great for everybody.
Okay, well that's case closed, I guess. It's pretty definitive. So hopefully that answers the question right there. So there's another question along the same lines from Huntsville. He says my low carb bread uses vital wheat gluten, just the gluten from the wheat, with oat fiber and lupin flour. I was told gluten is inflammatory, but I think that is only for people with allergies/intolerance. Can you comment on vital wheat gluten specifically in this context, as reducing inflammation largely from sugar and bad oils is important to me?
That's great that he wants to, or he or she, I don't know.
It's a he.
He wants to lower the bad stuff. Vital wheat gluten is essentially gluten that's like it's isolated. So you're just taking in like straight gluten. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it for anybody. I think it's highly inflammatory for everybody.
Okay. Wow. All right then. Well, hopefully that's helpful for him. He has another question here. Can you comment on essential oils, specifically around taking them orally or cooking with them?
I generally do not take them orally, and I don't cook with them at all. There are a few exceptions, but I take them in the form of supplements that are already made from a high quality company. So it would be something like peppermint oil and things like that. That's for like all stomach things. But otherwise, no. I think it's so hard to really know whether you're getting a top quality essential oil that is safe for that. A lot of companies claim, but to really know like what their manufacturing processes are, I'm not sure. The only website that I know is really good quality essential oils is mountainroseherbs.com. But as far as like the Young Living and stuff like that, those companies drive me crazy because they jack the prices so through the roof and make people think that, in order to get a really good quality essential oil, you have to buy from these companies and whatever, but they're just MLMs. And no offense to anybody, but you can get much cheaper, super amazing quality essential oils, just like I said, on Mountain Rose Herbs. Okay. 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 Yeah, I think it would start at home, obviously, with just lifestyle and diet and things, but also taking that further and getting the school involved. I know there's some schools that are involved in teaching kids yoga and mindfulness. And I know even listening to my daughter do virtual school at home, her one teacher every day has them do some deep breathing techniques together. So I think all that stuff is going to be vital. And not downplaying it. Like there's so many issues in the public school setting where they're constantly trying to deal with red tape and, this kid is saying this, but they can't deal with it the proper way because of, whatever reason. All those things need to be handled in an appropriate way. And if a kid is being a bully, we need to look at that from a mental health aspect instead of like, this is just a bad kid. That's not the case. There's something going on that's causing this child to behave this way. So what is it? So I think that like really parents being educated and then also educators being educated on mental health and how to properly deal with that stuff is so important. And then taking that even further and having, police and things really understand how to handle mental health situations. Because sometimes, they're put out to diffuse situations that they're being told of, but it's a mental health situation more than anything. And then they're diffusing it in such a way that's only making the mental health situation much worse.
Yes. And yeah, I mean, 100% subscribe for that whole view, because it just seems like so many, right now at least, depending on where you look in the country, so many mental health crises that involve the police end up with somebody dying, and they end up with somebody getting shot. And That's the last thing we want when somebody's going through a crisis that they need help with from somebody who's a trained professional. So, yeah, I mean, completely agree on that front. We did have I messed up my audio there for a second because I was muted for a second because I wanted to make sure there was no background noise coming in. But sorry, guys. I think while I asked that question, I was muted. So you could hear me, Jody, but everybody else in chat couldn't. So I'm still getting to grips with this software over here, guys. Apparently, I'm not a software expert yet. All right, so I'm scrolling through some more questions here. Sorry. To wrap up, I think that question. When it comes to mental health in 2050, I want to, for anybody who saw my interview a couple of weeks ago with Dr. Rob Tarswell, who's a mental health and nuclear medicine psychiatrist, he was talking about how the evolving viewpoint in the psychiatric professions when it comes to mental health is to look at not just biological and psychological causes, but also sociological causes. So to have this three-tiered view of how mental health issues develop, where you have the biological and genetic factors, you have the psychological and the experiences that someone's going through, and then you also have the overarching social factors that contribute to mental health issues being so widespread. And I think that certainly, if there is a vision for what mental health in 2050 might look like, it certainly seems like people from a variety of different fields are starting to converge on this belief now that we have to be able to see mental health as a social issue. We have to be able to see it as something that affects people throughout different parts of society, and that there are causes for these mental health issues that don't just relate to an individual's experience and what they do or what their brain chemistry is, but they actually relate to how that experience fits into the wider picture of who we are as a society. So it's nice to hear you say that, because I think that that's a view that I'm coming around to. It's a view that I think a lot of people are coming around to in recent years, for sure.
Yeah.
So what else do we have here? Oh, Huntsville asks, can you comment on your overall view on dairy? Deep breath.
Yeah. So this is another thing where, for certain individuals, dairy can definitely cause a lot of mental health concerns. And it's another thing where people don't recognize it. For sure, if you're going to have dairy, you want to opt for grass-fed dairy. So you can find that pretty much anywhere at this point. It used to be like you had to go to Whole Foods or something, but now you can find that anywhere. I see it at Target, at the local grocery store. So I'll just say grass milk or pasture raised or whatever. So you want to consume dairy that's coming from these pasture raised cows, because that's the way a cow is supposed to grow. They're supposed to eat grass. A lot of times, well, most of the time, the conventional cows are fed grains because it fattens them up. It's supposed to make a tastier piece of meat, but and then they feed them all this other crap to make them grow really fast so they can really flip it around and get the meat out there to everybody. But that comes with its own set of problems. So dairy is another thing where it's pretty inflammatory, especially for those susceptible. And it can cause all kinds of problems. Like, I know my skin issues that I was having was primarily coming from dairy. So, you have to kind of play around with it, but I wouldn't recommend dairy as a primary source of anything, really. And we don't even do dairy milk in the house. That all we do dairy wise is cheese here. And I always get like grass-fed cheese. So Kerrygold makes a great grass-fed cheese. They also do the grass-fed butter that we buy. But for sure, Kerrygold Dubliner cheese is a great cheese. But otherwise, there's really no need for milk. I know it's really pushed on everybody's throats. Like, you have to have dairy so you can get calcium and all this stuff. There's plenty of other places that you can get calcium from without consuming dairy milk. So. Okay,
cool. That's good to know. The next one was, Heiserfipper says, did y'all see the article about Subway bread not even being bread? It's like 10% sugar. Yeah, I mean, I could certainly believe that. I could definitely believe that Subway bread was not real bread.
And that was there was big controversy with them. I don't remember how many years ago, but that girl, she calls herself Food Babe, if you've heard of her.
No, I don't think so.
So she's caused a lot of uproar. People don't really care for her, but she's gone after these companies to have things removed. So she went after Kraft mac and cheese to have dyes and things removed from it. And she went after Subway. because there is a chemical that was in their bread that's like a dough conditioner that's found in yoga mats. So
Whoa.
yeah, so she went after them hard and got them to take it out. But people like, that's the thing though, the response that comes from that is, my Subway bread better taste the same. And it's like, what do you mean? Why do you want a yoga mat chemical in your bread? But it's the same thing like when I think it was Trix maybe or something, they were removing the artificial dyes, and parents complained so much their kids didn't like it as much anymore that they actually went back and put the dyes back in.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, and after a while, it's like when that stuff starts happening, it's like, what do people want? Do people want to be healthy or do they want to be unhealthy? It's like, it's crazy.
They just want their kids to smile and enjoy their sugary, colorful treats. I don't know.
And I guess like you can't blame them for wanting to give their kids things that make them happy, but like after a while, we want people to understand the context of what they're doing and what the significance is when they're conditioning their kid to be a big fan of sugar. Like if that's the case, like that was the case for me as a kid, and it caused me a lot of issues, going into adulthood. It took me a very long time to like unwind my relationship with sugar to the point where I am not just treating myself to something sugary every time I feel like I deserve to have a nice meal in the evening, and I'll just have a dessert with it. Like it's crazy how that
hard.
works.
And it like they've done brain scans where sugar has made the brain light up in the same way that cocaine does.
Yeah. I for sure can believe that, because I think that when you see the way that some people can experience such mood swings when sugar is involved, like it's not a surprise to see that it has that kind of effect on the brain, because it really does. The kind of highs and the crashes that you can get from sugar. Anybody who's been through that or who's kind of noticed that in themselves, probably not shocked to hear that it has a lot in common with a lot of really bad things. So I guess we're reinforcing it again, but yeah, sugar is bad, guys.
Yes, it creates a very vicious cycle that it's very hard to break out of, and you have to very mindfully break out of that. You can't just like, okay, I'm not gonna eat sugar today. Like you have to actually sit there and pay attention to what you're doing and break that cycle. And it can be hard because you're going to go through withdrawal symptoms if if you consume enough sugar.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's something I probably went through as well. So we have another one from this might be someone, I can't quite tell if this is someone who knows you and is kind of trolling you, but we'll see. The username is Mike Trout 0, and it says, Jody, how do macros work again?
Yeah, I know him. He's trolling.
Okay. All right. So we don't need to address the question of how macros work. All right. That's good.
I can like say it quickly if you want me to, just in case he's actually asking a real question.
Well, maybe there's someone out there who doesn't know how macros work. So why don't you explain for everybody?
So macros are your major groups that you're eating. So your fats, carbs, and protein, and you want to keep them in a specific balance to keep yourself good.
Cool. All right. Nice and simple.
That's basic.
So he also said before that, he said, okay, is this where all the cool kids are at? The answer to that is yes, this is where the cool kids are at. So welcome, Mike Trout 0. Dr. Zogs just says, Jody, is there a summary or course of where to get started learning about this from you guys? Looking for basics.
Come to me directly.
Okay. How can people do that?
I don't, there's not really like, I don't really have any content, I post stuff on my Instagram,
okay,
but I don't have anything written out. We've talked a lot about, we told Cam's whole story and Trevor's whole story as far as mental health is concerned in episode 1 of our podcast. So that's something you could go back and listen to. Otherwise I don't have anything like written out, but I think I may know that person. So if it is who I think it is, you can come to me directly and I can help you out.
Okay, cool. So there was Mike Trout 0 was asking, are you a medical doctor, Dr. Zogs? And Dr. Zogs said, I play one on TV. So I don't know if that gives you any clues as to who those people might be, but it sounds like you know them from your reaction there. So someone's asking about the audio. Oh, Huntsville is asking, do you do any fasting yourself or with your entire family? Sorry if I'm questiony. I'm 65 hours in. So he's 65 hours into a fast. So what are your thoughts on fasting as a whole?
So, I think this is another really common topic that comes up a lot. Trevor and I did intermittent fasting for a really, really long time. And actually, Trevor still does intermittent fasting. So that's just with intermittent fasting. He's just not eating his first meal until usually around like 2 or 3 o'clock. He does his with bulletproof coffee. So that's coffee with grass-fed butter and MCT oil blended into it. And it doesn't break the fast in a protein sense. So I guess metabolically it's not breaking your fast, but so it depends on how technical you want to get. Yeah, it does break the fast in some way. But it provides you enough, it fills you up enough to make it through to that 2 to 3 o'clock hour. So you're going from 7 or 8 o'clock at night and then you don't eat again until 2 or 3 in the afternoon. When I recently started working with a personal trainer, so I had to kind of get rid of all that and go back to basics and eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner, although I still suck at that. But I just don't eat like as soon as I wake up in the morning. But yeah, I think that fasting has shown great benefits, and I'm not opposed to it. I just haven't done it myself yet because I have to deal with 3 kids, and I'm just not interested in dealing with being angry, hangry, and dealing with the 3 kids.
Yeah, that's kind of my experience with it as well. I've gotten a lot of benefit out of intermittent fasting. I've never tried an extended fast beyond about 24 hours or so, but again, it's mostly for that reason. I have things that I do day to day that for which I need to be alert and I need to have concentration and energy available. And if I fast for 36 or 48 hours, I have some doubts that I'd be able to have full energy available to do those things, and I think that outside of that, though, my experience has been extremely positive. I think that one thing that I went through, or one thing that I kind of came around to realizing a few years ago, was that there was a strong link for me between my anxiety that I've suffered since I was a kid, and the way I was using, or the way I was handling my diet. So what I was doing was that I had anxiety associated with the feeling of hunger, because it was a trigger for, like, if I don't know when I'm next going to be able to eat, then it was an anxiety trigger in the sense that I would start to feel like, oh, I should eat something so that I'm not like really starving in an hour if I don't get the chance to eat soon. So it was almost like as soon as I experience any hunger at all, I have to have a full meal, so I was overeating quite substantially. And intermittent fasting actually was really important for me in that regard, because it taught me that the feeling of hunger didn't necessarily have to be something that was to be, sort of shied away from. I could be hungry for most of the morning and just be drinking water or drinking green tea or whatever. And that would actually make me feel better in some ways. So it really like inverted my relationship with food in terms of how it correlated with my anxiety. So from my own perspective, I think intermittent fasting is a really powerful tool. But as you kind of pointed out, if you are somebody who tries to exercise a lot, it can be kind of tricky, because when you're fasting and you naturally are maybe not taking in as many calories, or you're not taking in as much of the maybe the carbohydrates that you might need to fuel yourself if you're putting in an intense workout, it can be really tough. And I've been through experiences of having fasted and then tried to do an intense workout and just like completely just burned myself out in like half an hour, because I was trying to fast and work out and just like do everything at the same time. So I think that as long as you take a measured approach to it, where you understand what you're trying to accomplish and you understand what your body is accustomed to, I think fasting can be a great tool. So yeah, for anybody out there, I'm obviously not qualified to recommend it, but my own experience was great. So
yeah. And then like you said, you got to 48 hours or so, and it seems like people really start to get the energy burst and the mental clarity and stuff on day like 3 or so. Yeah. So maybe you can take it further if you can and see how it goes. But it can be a great reset to your system, and people for sure use it for longevity purposes. So, that's like a big topic now, but it's supposed to be great for longevity. I know smart people that do very long fasts, and it can be greatly beneficial. You just have to get through that initial part where it's really, really hard. And even these people that I know that do it, work out, like intense workouts while they're fasting. So it's totally possible. You just have to, it can be scary at first, because kind of like what you're experiencing as a kid there is probably your blood sugar becoming
Right.
unstable, going
Mm-hmm.
up and down, and that can, that's what causes that kind of hangry
Mm-hmm.
mood. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's tons of health benefits to fasting. So if you're 65 hours into a fast, that's great. Keep going.
Yeah. Good job. So, what else do we have? We have Mike Trout Zero says, "I love dairy." I don't I don't know if that's just him trolling again. But anyway, some people love dairy, I guess. Elite Boyardi says, "Gotta go. Thanks for everything I learned in this short time." Thank you, Elite Boyardi. We'll hopefully see you again. Sailfish16 says, "Mike Trout ditched me on YouTube." I don't know what that means. Is that who is who? You're okay. I thought you were reacting like you knew that person. No,
Yeah, I
okay,
don't know.
okay, all right. Well, never mind. Joe, Heiser Flippers. This is an actual question. So, leaving
Okay.
aside some of the trolling, Jody, any advice on helping a partner struggling with an eating disorder, specifically anorexia and appetite issues?
I am not qualified to go there. Yeah, I can't answer that. That's tough. That's gonna be like a psychiatrist is gonna
Mm-hmm.
do with
Yeah,
that. Yeah, I'm not sure because I could tell a person all day how beneficial food is, but if they are in that mode, then
yeah, and I can
no.
second that too. My wife's had some eating issues at times, and it's a tough thing to deal with, and it's not necessarily something that you can approach through, like you say, through just telling someone, hey, food is really good, because
Right.
something about their brain is telling them that that's not the case. And external stimulus, like being told that food is good, isn't necessarily going to get the job done. So I would probably just recommend seeing a specialist. I would
Yeah,
recommend
that
seeing
that's
someone
gonna be a
experienced.
yeah, that'll be a therapy situation to get
Mm-hmm.
through something like that because that's something deeper. It's really nothing to do with the food. That's something much deeper.
Sure, yeah. Now, Huntsville also says, can you comment on approved sweeteners like erythritol, monk fruit, etc.? I recently heard some bad things about Swerve. So I don't know what any of those are, but hopefully you do.
I do.
Okay, good.
So erythritol, anything that ends in an OL is a sugar alcohol. So the most common ones that you'll see now are xylitol, erythritol. Swerve, I believe, is erythritol. I don't know what bad information is out there about Swerve. Um, when you take in too many sugar alcohols, it can cause a lot of GI upset. So that's one thing that I do know about sugar alcohols. But these are not things that you should be using to replace sugar necessarily. Like, now I'm just going to eat all the sugar alcohols in the world. It's supposed to be there to help you like get through until you don't really need that stuff anymore. Because believe it or not, when you do cut out sugar, your taste buds will start to change. There's things that I used to love that I cannot eat anymore. I just think it has the grossest taste. I was never a big sugar kid for sure, but Reese's peanut butter cups were like my favorite in the world. And now when if I eat I haven't had one in years, but the last time I tried one, I thought it tasted like dirt. I can't eat it anymore. I still like peanut butter cups, but I have to
Mm-hmm.
get other brands. So I'll get Justin's or Lily's, something like that, where they're way less sugar, but they taste normal to me now. So, there is hope. If you are trying to break a sugar addiction, you will eventually get over it if you just keep going. But that's kind of what those sugar alcohols are there for, so that you can have a baked good or something when you need it without consuming the sugar, because they don't cause the insulin spikes like a sugar would.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Hopefully that answers Huntsville's question pretty well. So, Final Table Boy says, no sugar, no pizza, 2020 end already. um, okay. Yeah, I mean, I think we can all sympathize with 2020 end already. That I think is something that is a pretty much universal sentiment right now. We're all ready for this year to be done.
Yes.
Yeah. Huntsville says, when cooking, do you use any sweeteners then?
If I'm making a baked good or something like that for my kids, we use maple syrup to sweeten stuff. It's
Okay.
still sugar. At the very least, it has some more nutrients than what other things do. So the only things that we'll really use to sweeten would be maple syrup, raw honey, completely unfiltered raw honey, and coconut sugar.
Mm-hmm.
Or like the sugar alcohols, I'll use xylitol or erythritol. But those are kind of strange because they create this like cooling sensation in your mouth that can be a little weird. So it's not the same as using a regular sugar. There's going to be that like weird cooling sensation. And I know, just going back to the last question, monk fruit was brought up, and monk fruit is fine. Monk fruit, stevia, and then any of the sugar alcohols are generally the sugar replacements that are 0 calorie but safe.
Okay, that's good to know. So Final Table Boy seems to think we're finished. We're not finished. He says, "Awesome stream, thanks guys." I don't know if he's leaving, but we're not done yet. We skip forward to the questions just because there were a ton of them coming in. I didn't want to have to go back so far that we covered all the discussion points already. So we still definitely have some time, guys. So if you guys have more questions, do fire them into the chat. Huntsville says he's going to shut up now. You don't have to, buddy. You can keep asking questions. It's all good. More questions are good. So the question I had actually, I think, which kind of relates to my own experience, but it also relates to something that I think a lot of people have been through at one time or another, which is the usage of food to kind of manage emotions in a mental health sense, where we get into patterns when we're feeling kind of rough, we're feeling low in some way, and food can be something where if we just eat eat something we like, eat something tasty, it picks us up for a while. And I've struggled with that over various periods of my life. What advice would you give to someone who struggles with that kind of thing, struggles with those kinds of habits of managing their emotions using food?
Yeah, so those kinds of things create a dopamine hit, and that's why people use that. But so, I mean, this is just basic, but one of the easiest things that you can do to try to avoid that is to drink a glass of water and wait 15 minutes and then see if you still really want to have that item. And if you do, you can always try to swap it out for something that's better. Going in for like a healthy snack. I know it's not going to create that same dopamine effect if you're eating a piece of candy versus going in and eating some cucumbers, but if you give yourself some time to really think like, do I really need to have this? Or is this an emotional thing that I'm doing? That's just basic. But then if it continues to happen, that could be something more of like like we previously said, where it's like a therapy situation.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that, I think an interesting sort of aspect of that is the way in which on the one hand, you have the aspect of that, which is psychological in the sense that people have an attachment to the idea of a certain food, where this food is like a treat for me, and therefore even just thinking about having this food gives you a certain sense of an emotional hit, And then on the other hand, you have the chemical aspect of it, where your brain is looking for something that is going to give it that emotional boost to actually feel better in a chemical sense. Do you think that there's just with that in mind, is there a suggestion that you can use things that are not food to just like substitute the dopamine rush, let's say? Like, could you do something else that maybe you could replace eating with, I don't know, doing something else that's fun for you just for 15 minutes, like you say?
Yeah. I mean, you could go out and do some kind of burst of exercise if that's your thing. People love to play video games. That's going to give you a dopamine hit. But they all carry their own things with them, where if you're using food, then you're going to overeat on the food or whatever. If you're using video games, you might go too far down the video game path, for too long, too many hours at one time or whatever. So they all have these different things with them. So I think it's really just about becoming mindful of these things and recognizing that they happen. And then, there's like supplements that you can take on a daily basis to try to help stabilize. Trevor takes stuff every single day. I'm trying to think what's in it. I think there's L-theanine in it.
L-theanine is great. I love L-theanine. It's when I discovered that, that was the first major breakthrough I had in terms of my anxiety, because I was like, wow, there's a thing that I can take that has, from what I can tell, no damaging side effects. It doesn't need a prescription. It's over the counter. It's cheap, and I can just take it, and I feel way more calm than I used to. It's like, this is magic,
Yeah, and actually, he swears by lemon balm tea. So that is it for him. He drinks lemon balm tea every time he finishes a session. Anytime he does anything stressful, he'll drink lemon balm tea, and he feels like it just kind of quiets his mind. But he also takes a lemon balm supplement. So he's doubling down on the lemon balm and loves it, and has other people taking it as well because it works so well. And lemon balm is something where if it works for you, it's going to work right away. You're not going to have to wait. It doesn't need to build up in your system or anything. Like right away if lemon balm works for you or not. It doesn't do anything for me, but for him, it completely calms him down and brings him back to earth. Actually, if anybody saw him playing on Poker Go, what was it called? Poker After Dark or something? Is that
probably, yeah. Probably, yeah.
Nice wife I am. He had a cup and he was just chugging something the whole time, and it was lemon balm tea. He drank it the whole time he played. So yeah, I mean, he really swears by that, and it's very easy to get your hands on. You can find it. Traditional Medicines is the brand that we buy. But it's just tea, and it just tastes like tea. There's nothing weird about it or anything. So, and he just drinks it straight. So
cool.
Yeah,
and in terms of your own personal supplements, you mentioned supplements there. What kind of do you use supplements extensively to kind of like help manage your own nutrition on top of what you eat?
Yeah, I take tons of supplements every day.
Okay. Do you want to recommend any in particular for anybody out there who might be looking for certain things?
I think I think it's important to have your levels checked of certain things. Obviously, I cannot recommend that people go out and take certain supplements without getting checked. Your levels. Obviously, there's other things where you're not going to get your L-theanine levels checked. Like, you're just going to take that.
Sure.
And I take NAC every day, which is N-acetylcysteine. So that's another thing where you can safely take that.
Okay. Cool.
I take vitamin D every single day. That's something that you want to get checked. You want to find out where your levels are, and then you want to get them into the mid-range of what they say is okay. Because the doctor will look at a low but still good result and say, okay, you're good. But you really want to bring your vitamin D up a decent amount. So, for me personally, I take 5,000 IU every single day. And then when you take that, you mix it with vitamin K2 and vitamin A, and it helps with absorption and all that stuff. So, and then also vitamin D is a fat soluble vitamin. So you want to take that when you're eating fat. So just if you're eating food, there's going to be some kind of fat in it, unless you're eating, a fat-free diet, but you want to mix it with some kind of fat and it'll help absorb it better as well. Cool. So I take that stuff. I take vitamin C every single day, quercetin, elderberry. We take all kinds of stuff.
Do you have like a daily handful of pills that you're just like wolfing down?
I post pictures of it on Instagram too, like my handful. Actually, I have. Let's see if I can get it to come up, because I took one this morning. So can you see this?
Yeah, I can. Oh wow, that's a lot of pills. Holy crap. Yeah, that's a lot of pills. Wow.
And that's just my morning ones. I take more in the afternoon, and then because some of them I take with food, others I take on an empty stomach, and then I take more before I go to sleep. But some of them are like, I take multiple doses of quercetin every day. I take multiple doses of magnesium. So I split those up morning and night.
Okay. Wow. That's a lot. But yeah, I think that certainly getting tested for your levels of certain stuff seems like a good place to start for everybody, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Okay. So I want to say welcome to Jennifer in my chat, who is someone that I've been in her stream lately. She's showed up here, which is great. She says when she took vitamins like B stress complex, I would get nauseous in the mornings. Is that a common thing?
Yeah, especially if you're not taking it with food. So I would, if you're taking it with food and still getting nauseous, I'm not sure, but a lot of the vitamins will cause you to get nauseous if you take them on an empty stomach. Okay,
cool. That's good to know. So Huntsville has another one. Can you talk about the effects of caffeine, both nutrition and mental health effects? Do you concern yourself about toxins in coffee, etc.?
Okay, so
that sounds like a big question. Well, from your reaction, it was like another deep breath one.
Well, no, there's a few questions in there, so I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to go here. So as far as toxins in coffee, there's so bulletproof coffee is built around, there's bulletproof coffee, the recipe, and then there's bulletproof coffee, the brand. So the brand Bulletproof is concerned with mold toxins on coffee because of the way that it's dried. When they throw all the beans down and let them dry, then they grow mold on them, and then that just gets like rinsed off or whatever, and then you're taking that in, and people can be very sensitive to molds. So if you are concerned with it, you can buy Bulletproof Coffee brand, and that's like his number one priority is making sure there's no mold toxin in his coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for a while, I always bought Bulletproof because I knew that it was a safe bet with the mold toxin, but I've just gotten to a point where I don't concern myself with it as much. I don't think that I have a super high mold problem, like intolerance wise.
Mm-hmm.
So I just buy whatever. I make sure
Sure.
that it's not like I won't buy anything that is artificially flavored or anything like that. I get naturally flavored coffee if I want a flavored coffee, or I always buy organic. But otherwise, I try not to like make myself overly crazy with every single thing that I'm consuming
Mm-hmm.
because my God, I'd not eat anything else ever in life. So, um, so that's as far as the toxins are concerned. As far as like, I drink coffee every day, every
Mm-hmm.
single day. I probably drink more than I should, but I drink it every day. And, this is another area where the discussion is really kind of at each other, So
Mm-hmm.
some people say absolutely no coffee if you have anxiety and depression and mental health issues. No coffee. Caffeine is bad, really bad. And there's the other side that says caffeine is not bad. It's a great drug to use. And, it has all these benefits. So I think really what it comes down to is how do you feel when you drink it? And if you don't feel bad, then by all means. Like, I don't think it's a good idea to drink it from morning until night or anything, but I'm never going to tell anybody not to drink caffeine unless obviously you're drinking it and you're having some kind of adverse reaction, like your heart is going crazy or something. Then obviously you shouldn't do it. But caffeine can even be useful for even something like ADHD
Mm-hmm.
because it's just a mild version of a stimulant.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah. Personally, I have had every time in the past few years that I've tried to go back to drinking coffee, doesn't work for me. Like coffee just sends me completely like off the wall when it comes to anxiety. But I do have this right here, which is smart caffeine pills. So this is caffeine plus L-theanine, and that stuff works fantastically because
okay, cool.
when you add the L-theanine to the caffeine, that for me is like the exact right balance. So for anybody out there who, like me, struggles with coffee for anxiety reasons, smart caffeine is a great way to go. I've had really good experiences with that. And Huntsville says, what about tea? I'm British. You don't have to tell me about tea. I love tea. I don't drink enough of it because I find that the tea that I'm able to get here in the States just doesn't quite match up to the tea that I used to
Sure.
drink back at home. But yeah, green tea, any kind of tea is usually, I think, going to be it's fine for me. I don't know for anybody else in terms of how much caffeine they can actually tolerate. But for me, tea, totally fine, no problem. Coffee, like just stay away, treat it like the devil for me.
And
Uh,
there's tons of teas that are any herbal tea is going to be caffeine free.
mhm.
So that's always options. And green tea is great. It's super great. But it has caffeine, but it's not anywhere near the same as a cup of coffee. So generally, tea is going to be just fine for people.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So I'm going to go back to some of Jenny's questions here. She mentioned, I'm just scrolling through. So we talked about the B stress complex. Oh, I think she wanted to know what kind of food to eat with the B stress complex, because she said, I feel like sometimes I would try to eat too, but I must not have eaten enough, or maybe if there's a specific kind of food you're supposed to eat, to prioritize with the B stress complex. I'm not sure.
I don't think there's a specific type of food, but like just having actual food in your stomach is a big thing because
Mm-hmm.
I can drink a protein shake and still not take my vitamins because it's
Mm-hmm.
not, you're getting all the stuff that you need, but it's not enough. Like I need
Sure.
substance in my stomach,
Mm-hmm.
not a drink.
Sure.
So
Yeah, that makes sense. What else do we have? Liquid magnesium. Jenny asks about. I don't. She just said, can you ask her about liquid magnesium? I don't know if there's any more context than that, but I haven't personally heard of liquid magnesium as much of a thing. But do you have any familiarity with that?
yeah, I would need her to clarify a little bit
Okay.
because there's powders that you can make into a drink that I use here in my house, but there's
Mm-hmm.
also like liquid magnesium as far as like lotions and things
Mm-hmm.
rub on your skin. So I'm
Oh,
just not.
okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure what, and then like what does she want to know about it?
Okay. Well, I think she's still in the chat, so hopefully she can answer that. She also mentions she used to drink coffee, but then got prescribed Vyvanse and modafinil. It seemed like I would be at super high risk for a heart attack or seizure. Yeah, I certainly, I try to stay away from talking too much about medications because I feel like, I'm not a professional, and if I'm not talking with a professional, I don't want to be out there commenting too much about that stuff. But if there's any element that makes you feel like you're at risk for something, then it seems hard for coffee to be worth it in that regard, so that seems very responsible.
So that's interesting because Vyvanse is actually what Cam just started taking. So it's a stimulant. And then coffee is also going to be a stimulant. So you're just mixing two stimulants together. So
cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So Heiser Flipper says, what brand do you use? I think he's referring to my Smart Caffeine. So this is just I think it's called Smarter Vitamins. It's like, it's backwards on the webcam, so you can't see it properly, but I think it's called Smarter Vitamins. What else do we have? Huntsville says, shout out Peak Tea Crystals, PIQUE tea crystals. I'm not sure. I've not heard of those, but if those are a valuable thing, then that sounds good. Huntsville also says, I take resveratrol to try to boost autophagy. I'm not sure what he means here. Making expensive urine. I don't know what that means.
That's usually in reference to taking lots of vitamins, that you're just essentially creating expensive urine.
Oh, I see. That you're just not actually ingesting any of them, and I get it.
All right. There's some arguments for that. Like, are these actually good to take? Are they worth it? But resveratrol, that's an antioxidant. It's great. It comes from it's in red wine.
Okay.
Which is why they say, you can have a glass of red wine every night. It's healthy and all that.
I see.
That's what that is. And so that's going to lower inflammation in people. And it's never a bad thing to take.
Okay, cool. That's good to hear as well. So Jennifer is just clarifying. I think she says she doesn't quite remember about the liquid magnesium. Just curious if that's something she used or was familiar with, but it sounds like it's not.
I mean, we use. I had Cam drinking last night. So there's a brand, Natural Calm, that makes powdered magnesium, but you put it in water and you make a drink. So they come in different forms. Their most common one is a magnesium citrate, which can run right through you, but and you're not even absorbing that much. But I buy this, it's the same Natural Calm, but it's Calmful Muscles, and it's a different type of magnesium. So it's like a watermelon flavored drink, and I'll actually drink that on a day after that I had like alcohol the day before, and that'll usually help me feel a little bit better. But magnesium is super vital to the body, and we definitely do not get enough. That's why I supplement with it every single morning and night. And it can help you get a good night's sleep. It can help you calm down, but there's plenty of ways to get it. That's just one way. Another super effective way to get magnesium in your body is just to soak in Epsom salt. So,
okay.
But yeah, there's liquid type that you can spray on your body and rub it into your skin. But I don't really like those because it makes your skin burn. Like, it'll make it feel like it's burning a little bit.
Yeah.
So that's tough.
That doesn't sound good.
No.
so Mike Trout Zero says, holy hell, modafinil was insane. Felt like my blood was itchy. Awful experience.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I don't even know how to comment on that. I don't know what itchy blood feels like, but I do not want to know. I do not
I don't
want
really
to
know anything about modafinil. I've heard about it just because I've listened to a lot of the Bulletproof stuff, and he talks about it all the time. The guy that started Bulletproof, Dave Asprey, so he talks about modafinil all the time, but I personally don't know anything about it. So
yeah, I don't really have much familiarity either. So Mike Trout says, yes, I thought it was just like Adderall, but next level stuff. Wanted to rip my skin out. Wasn't for me. Yeah, that's terrible. These are awful. This is really bad. I don't want to experience any of that. So I'm going to stay well away from modafinil from now on.
Yes.
Holy crap. All right. We have, I think, one more thing. Dr. Zog says, was it a glass or a bottle of red wine? It should be four times as good for you, right? If you drink a bottle.
No.
Yeah, I don't think that's how that works, but maybe Dr. Zog's, if he's a doctor, maybe he can tell us. Maybe we're wrong.
He's not a doctor. He's not a doctor.
Okay. So I think I think we're probably getting to the point where we can pretty much come close to wrapping this up, because I don't think there's a little bit of trolling still crawling in from the visitors that we have here, but I don't think I think we've kind of covered most of the questions that we have. I don't know if you guys have anything else that you wanted to ask Jody here. If there's anything that pops up, feel free. But I suppose just to kind of wrap things up here, if you were to be able to give one kind of fundamental piece of advice, I suppose, based on your experience to people now who might be going through maybe some mental health ups and downs in this stressful year that we're having, what would your sort of one maybe important but simple piece of advice be?
I would say this has nothing to do with nutrition, but okay. I would say get outside every day.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's a really valuable one. It's certainly not always easy. I think that these days when we're told that outside is scary because there's a big deadly disease going around, right. I think that we all struggle to find the right opportunities to go outside, the right things to do that are safe but also fun and allow us to get out. And certainly for me here in Vegas, it's not the easiest because it's 95 degrees out still in October, which is insane. And being a redheaded man from England, I am not very well built for that. So I try to get outside when I can, but the summer is honestly a struggle for me here in Vegas. It's not easy, but I'm very grateful we're coming into winter because I get to spend a lot of time outside in beautiful 70-degree sunshine with no rain and nothing like that. So that's all good. I think we all really appreciate you being here, Jody. Thank you for dedicating your time and passing on a lot of great insight. I think what we're going to do now is I'm going to have a bit more of a chat with the guys in the chat box. So I'm going to wrap up the Zoom call. You can hop off and I'll continue the call itself. Okay. But yeah, thank you very, very much for being here. We'd love to have you back at some point. Hopefully in a year that's not 2020 when we have a bit more optimism to discuss. But yeah, I really appreciate it. So thank you for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Cool. All right, take care, and we'll see you soon, hopefully.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, guys. So that was Jody Savage, accomplished nutritionist and all-around delightful person. Thank you to Jody for being here. We really appreciate that. I hope you guys got a lot out of that conversation. I hope that you picked up some valuable pieces of advice when it comes to diet, nutrition, things like that. If you guys have any comments on the interview, I'm happy to hear them. I'm happy to discuss things. I'm glad you guys seem to enjoy things. I'm glad Dr. Zoggs, Mike Trout Zero, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you enjoyed things. So yeah, that about wraps that one up. But the good news is that the stream is not done. We're going to be back in just a minute. I'm going to have to briefly hop off stream just to realign my settings on Streamlabs because it doesn't like Zoom. I have to close down Zoom, close down Streamlabs, reopen Streamlabs. And we're going to play some Last of Us, guys. We're going to play The Last of Us. It's one of the best games of all time. It's a horror game. It's exciting. It's scary. It has an incredible story. We're starting it from the beginning. I have my PS4 right here, ready to go. I have my controller right here. I have my monitor over here. It's going to take me a few minutes to get set up, but I'll be back very shortly, guys. And we're going to play one of my favorite games of all time, and I'm super excited.